morning, guys. Hurricane Laura is here. Today I'm going to talk to you about the wind that's part of that hurricane force. So Hurricane Laura is hitting the Gulf Coast right now with about 150 mile per hour winds when it came in at 1 a.m. last night. It's died down a little bit, so it's down to a category 2, and it's 100 mile per hour winds. Hit the Gulf Coast at category 4, which is 150 mile an hour winds, and now it's died down. Now that it's over land and it's not absorbing that thermal energy, that evaporative energy of the water from the Gulf Coast, the warm water, now it is dying down a little bit, so it's down to a category 2 with just 100 mile an hour winds, but it's still really destructive. When we talk about wind speed in a hurricane, we're talking about the destructive power of what that wind can do. So we're talking about how fast are the winds going and what kind of damage would they do. We call that the Saffir-Simpson scale. When we talk about wind speed in a hurricane, we're talking about sustained winds, how much is going consistently for a few minutes. There can be gusts of more powerful winds that would go up to a higher speed, but most of the time we're talking about what the consistent speed is. Right now, wind speed in Sacramento is about 9 miles per hour with gusts up to 13 miles per hour, just to give you an idea of how that looks. If you have a hurricane like we have with Hurricane Laura, you've got sustained wind speeds of 100 miles per hour with wind gusts up to maybe 120 miles per hour. That is the difference. It's a big difference and a big difference in damage. So I made myself a little tool here to measure the wind speed. This is called an anemometer. An anemometer is whatever kind of tool you're using to measure wind speed. I took a ping pong ball, tied to a string, and then tied the string to the center point of a protractor. And based on the angle that the wind is blowing, it will show me how much wind pressure, how much speed is actually blowing at. So now I'm putting a level on it to make sure that I'm holding it up at a flat and even angle. But if you don't have a level, that's fine, just try and hold it flat. Our first trial is going to be to do this wind speed with the fan on a low setting. Alright, this level here, we're looking at maybe 95 degrees. This level here is about a 90, maybe 98 degrees. Alright, so if you take a look at this, if I get it to zoom in on the right spot, we've got a wind speed at right about 100 degrees. Now for the big boy. Alright, so looking like it's right around 110 degrees. Alright, on super high speed, we're blowing like crazy out here. 120 degrees, gusts up to 130 degrees. So a tropical storm is basically, like we were talking about before, what is traveling across the Atlantic Ocean with warming waters adding energy to it. Those are storms that have less than 75 mile an hour winds. Once you get up to 74, 75 mile an hour range, it becomes a category 1 hurricane. And if a category 1 hurricane is on land, it's going to have some damage like this. Maybe a broken window, some leaves blown around, branches blown off. Nothing major, nothing anybody is going to be homeless for, right? Category 2, winds 96 to 110 miles an hour. Now we're looking at some bigger damage, more broken windows, more tree damage, some neighborhood damage to power lines, and it may be several days before you get power back. Category 3, we're ramping it up. Now it's categorized as a major hurricane. And this is where you have major hurricane winds, 111 to 129 miles per hour. You've got even well-built homes are going to suffer major damage. The first homes that are going to have any significant damage in any hurricane are the ones that are poorly built, the ones that don't have secure roofs or windows or anything like that. But category 3, now all the homes, even the really well-built ones, are starting to have damage. We have broken windows, pieces of roof or patio blown away, trees ripped apart, electricity and water is disrupted, and could be a few weeks before you get that repaired and put back into place. Category 4, this is where Hurricane Laura was last night. Major hurricane winds, 130 to 156 miles per hour. She was on the upper end of that. Severe damage to even well-built homes, missing roofs, windows, walls that are broken off, doors, patios, trees ripped apart or pulled out, power lines down and roads blocked by debris, and you could have power outages for months. So this is the kind of thing that we're looking at for the result of Hurricane Laura. Category 5, Category 5, as you might imagine, is definitely another major hurricane. Winds are 157 miles or more. So you could have 200 mile an hour winds and like, yeah, no, that's still in the same category. This is the top level of hurricane. And I'll talk about why it's the top in a minute. Many buildings would be destroyed in this situation. Roads cut off, power cut off, utilities cut off, trees blown away entirely, roads washed out entirely. No one can live here. This is an uninhabitable place, and it will be months, if not years, before they get all of these things back in place where people can actually build and live in this spot. Category 5 is the highest level hurricane that we have. The reason it's not, well, people have talked about, can we maybe make a category 6 for those really, really powerful ones? The problem is this is based on destruction based on winds. So if the winds have completely destroyed the place, there's nowhere to go. There's no extra level of, after you've completely destroyed a house, what more destruction would you qualify? Right? I mean, you're ripping out the ground, you've already ripped out part of the trees, so that's already part of this category. So this is the upper end of that category, and it's going to stay that way. This is a good measure of wind damage. However, it doesn't account for flood warnings, and unfortunately some people hear that, oh, category 4 storm, it dropped down to a category 2. Hey, we can go back home, this is all good. But it doesn't account for all the extra wind and rain and storm surge. So Laura last night was supposed to hit at high tide, which meant that the water was at its highest level, and expecting to have a 15 to 20 foot surge of the water getting up to a higher level, which meant that if you were on a house near the beach, your house got flooded. End of story. That's just the way it is. Take a look at these links. I'm going to show you a little bit more about what Hurricane Laura has done, and we'll talk about it today, and then take a look at the video on storm surge so you can understand how a storm surge can make one level of the water even higher, and that flooding can go inland for several miles. Have a great day, guys. Talk to you soon.